just have to be confident in what you're discussing. And it resonated. I mean, the customer who's coming in there and want us to know about their house wants to know that I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So the pressure that's on folks now to buy a house is different than it was 5 years ago or before the pandemic even. So in terms of like what the most important thing for them to focus on later, it's going to vary from house to house. And if I know going into a house that's 100 years old and we're going to have this problem with the electrical system, I will specifically bring them to that and make sure that they're paying attention for that part.
I feel like we're kind of like the bad guys in our industry.
Yeah,
Don't
definitely.
you?
I get that a lot. Yeah.
You know, someone who I've been doing this for 10 years, insurance. You've been doing home inspection for God knows how long ever, right? 16 years?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. 16 years. You know, I'm very impressed with you. I've always been impressed with you, having met you from our old networking group.
Yeah, the old, can't say it.
Huh?
Can't say those letters.
Say whatever you want.
Oh.
But you were always genuine, always kind, always, you care about people. That's always what I gathered about you. And,
yeah, that's mutual though. I mean, I feel like I gravitate toward people that feel that way as well. And I always enjoyed having you in that group. I mean, it was a brief overlap of time when you were already there for a while. I came in, you left. So there was a brief overlap, and I'm glad we had that connection.
Yeah, same. It's funny because it feels like it was longer, like we had a longer time together. But when I look back, it was only from 2018 to 2019. It was only about a year.
Short.
Very, very short.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like a trying phase of what the networking group. But anyway, so today my guest, you know, he probably knows your house better than you do, which is really exciting. And I'm really excited to dive into, because while I think my line of work is very boring in the sense of the consumer perspective, I got to imagine consumers probably feel the same about your line of work of like, man, this is, 3 hours of sitting through home inspections and this and that. Let's just get through the process. But the idea of a home inspection, especially today with how difficult it is to place insurance, I think it's valuable. And from the reviews of your client testimonials, the dedication, the thoroughness, the effectiveness, how quickly you move through the inspection, I think that's needed. And I just don't understand why people will ever waive an inspection, which I think you probably have some good insight on that.
I absolutely do. Yeah, we can touch on that.
Yeah, and so I'm just looking forward to this, because I think when I put it out, there's a lot more value than to just having this conversation as Kevin and Paul, insurance and home inspection. It's about why people should go through the home inspection process. You as an advisor, not someone or an educator, but not someone that's going to push something on somebody and say, hey, you need to buy this, you need to do that. So there's a lot of good stuff you gave me to work with. When you think about your first home inspection in 1998, walk me through that, because you said it went the opposite of what you probably thought it was going to go.
Sure. So there were a couple of pieces about that stick out with me over 25 years later. That at first I was somewhat impressed with the process. The inspector that took me through the house was so quick. He saw something like from across the room, saw something, went over and said, "Here, this is rotten," and he poked a screwdriver through it. And I was like, that guy's got eagle crow eye. How did he see that from across the room? It was amazing. And the whole thing went so fast. We were there for an hour, and it was a 100-year-old home. So I was kind of curious about that. But then I got his report a couple days later, and I read through it very closely, and I saw stuff in the report that we didn't see or touch upon. And I just started thinking how that could have happened, and realized pretty quickly that what happened was he had inspected the home already for another buyer. The deal fell apart. That's how he knew where the rot was, stuff like this. And I just thought it would have been just an easy thing to tell me at the beginning. Hey, Kevin, I've been here before. I did this inspection. Deal fell apart, but why don't we go through it together? I would have been glad to have his time and his expertise there. So I was disappointed, I guess you could say, and just started picturing it. If that was the bar the industry had set back in 1998, that there was a lot of room for improvement, very easy room for improvement. So I started looking into it even back then, but I didn't get into the industry until 2009. And that was after being in a BNI group, representing myself at an entirely different industry, and meeting another home inspector in that BNI group, and just looking at how he was so wildly different from this experience that I had in 1998, that I was like, see, there it is. That's what I was wanting, good customer service end of it. In my industry, you have to have a lot of technical knowledge, but then the customer service part of it is entirely up to you. However you present that information to your customers is your own personality and your own delivery. So that's what I wanted. I wanted to get into the industry and provide a level of service that was different than what I got.
Yeah. What was your like childhood and what you wanted to do? Was obviously home inspections, and I actually had this conversation with a couple of other home inspectors, and it was just kind of something that they fell into.
Yeah, it's a second career. I don't think anybody at 18 years old or 15 years old is like, I want to be a home inspector. That doesn't happen.
What did you want to do?
Oh, probably rock star.
Do you play music?
I do.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What do you play?
I see. That's why I'm a home inspector.
Yeah.
I don't play anything well.
Okay.
I have guitars that I mess around with, a bass guitar. In school growing up, I was in the band, so
cool.
saxophone,
Yeah.
band geek,
Exactly what like do you break out your guitars when you're at home and kind of play, or?
Very rarely. So I have 3 kids. One of them just recently took an interest in the guitar, so I tuned one of my old ones up, gave it to him, and he lives in New York, so he was home this weekend, and he picked up one of mine that's sitting in my office, and he's got some of the open chords down now. So it's fun to see him at a point where I was 30 years ago.
That's very cool.
And kind of picking it up.
I love music. I play the piano. Well, so I started when I was maybe 16. I started to play the piano, and actually, ironically, I started this YouTube channel, Paulie M, based off of uploading videos of me playing the piano on it in 2016. It's like a 17-year-old channel.
Yeah.
So when I started the Open Exchange podcast / Your Platform podcast, I put everything on its own channel, and then I realized, like, why am I not leveraging the audience that I have already on there? So everything goes now to that Paulie M, but I taught myself from YouTube how to play the piano. Okay. And to this day, I mean, it's all memory. I can't really, read music or anything like that.
Right.
I understand the scales. I don't understand how to read. I don't understand,
it's a whole music theory too. Like when somebody says like going to like a 7th or a minor or something, I'm like, no idea, but I can hear it when it happens. I just don't know how to do it.
Yeah, right. So, you being in the industry for 16 years, what keeps you curious about homes and home inspections and dealing with clients? Because obviously at this point, in your career, getting back into it in 2018, there's something that sparked the move back into home inspections. And it's probably the passion of making sure that people are making the right choice for themselves.
Sure. Yeah. So I started in home inspections in 2009, but in 2018 is when, those first 9 years in the industry, I was working for another established company. But having started other smaller businesses and stuff in the past, you get restless and you want to be your own person, your own boss again. So I started at Sunrise in 2018. So I never, from 2009 till now, I've been solidly in that industry. And it never gets boring. I like what I do.
Yeah.
Sometimes I look forward to houses. Sometimes I don't. Like I'll do, as I mentioned to you earlier, when an address comes on my schedule, I'll look at the address on Realtor.com and take a look at the pictures of it. And sometimes like, oh man, what a neat house. I can't wait to see it. Can't wait to get into it. And sometimes I dread it.
Yeah. Why? Why would you dread it?
Different reasons.
Yeah.
Sometimes sometimes it could be a giant house, like 10,000 square foot. And those ostentatious big houses, they don't do anything for me, but you're going to be there all day and it's going to be not as exciting, but sometimes you can just look at a house and see, even in the pictures the best pictures that they come up with to market the house, you see that there's evidence of like hoarding or something like that. And so, you're going to have another challenge that way.
I see.
There are key terms that everybody knows in real estate that are trigger terms for everything. It's like, says, like opportunity, if something's a unique opportunity, that means it needs work. So when I see those kinds of things, you get, oh no, this is going to be a challenging inspection, but the challenging ones aren't bad. It's just more of what you do. And to your point you mentioned earlier about, educating versus advising, what I do with my clients. And that's one of the things I like about the business is I'm not advising them. So I'm not telling them you should buy this or you should run away screaming. It's really just, I believe every time that I'm just providing them with information that they can then make a better decision based on. So it's a very difficult decision to make, as you know, but having more information than you had when you first, as a buyer, if you saw it online, you got to visit it, you're excited, you're looking at everything there, but having that more information at the end of the home inspection process is what I do. So I'm not going to tell them to buy it or not. It's just give them that information.
So I want to go to that, but there's, I want you to walk me through your first deal of home inspection. I shared this with Kevin Mace. My first insurance deal, I remember feeling so anxious because I sold it. And it was because of the fact that this person gave me their life routing account number, social security number, blood sample.
Yeah.
Walk me through your first one.
Yeah. There's that part was nerve wracking. Unfortunately, in my industry, to become a home inspector, you have to work next to or alongside an experienced home inspector for a while. Before you can even sit down to take the test to get licensed, you have to do at least 100 inspections with some underneath the guidance of
Wow.
somebody. Yeah. In fact,
So 300 hours essentially, right?
Yeah.
Wow. That's insane.
That's fair. Yeah. It can be more because later during that 100 inspection process, the supervisor you're working with should be expecting you to produce reports. So you learn how to do that, which is after the inspection. So it's 300 hours in the field, could be another 400 hours at home.
Insane.
Yeah.
What's your favorite type of house to do an inspection on?
Great question. And I've talked to other home inspectors in the area, and they know my answer to this. It's like, give me a 1,500 square foot raised ranch, 2 a day, every day. You know what you're going to see when you get in there.
In and out.
Everything. Yep. It's not in and out. Not that I want to rush my client, but I know where the issues are going to be, and it's not going to take forever to do it.
Yeah.
And it's fun to point out the issues to those people. But, I know that I can do it quickly, or not quickly, but I just know what I'm going to see. So
Right.
I don't know why that's my favorite kind of house. I mean, I have a colonial personally.
Yeah.
My kids are grown. I raised them in the colonial, but my wife and I talk sometimes about that future home, and I'm like, oh, give me a ranch, one story, so I'm not going upstairs all the time.
This is our second house. We bought our first house in 2016. We bought a 100-old house. The house was built in 1925. It was a brick cape, slate roof. So, I mean, obviously, that's almost 100 years old.
Was that in London?
Quaker Hill.
Okay.
Quaker Hill on Richards Grove,
Yep.
very top on the left. And it was, I think, as a buyer, someone who's young, ambitious, wants to buy a house, it's exciting. But when you look back at it, there's probably a lot of things that were missed in inspection or maybe overlooked. For the sake of whatever. I mean, I think maybe you can keep me honest here. We pay for inspection beforehand, correct? Or is it paid? I can't remember how it works, to be honest. It's been a little while.
We take up, the system I use, the scheduling system, gives a client an opportunity to pay before the inspection.
Yep.
But most people just use to pay there.
Oh,
I
okay.
think that's that idea
That's
that
good.
like I'm not going to send you money until you show up.
Yeah, that's okay. That's good. So, but I remember just kind of going through this, and you get really emotionally attached to your thing, your purchase. I feel like now that's happening more and more and more, and you're seeing things like home inspections getting waived, and from an insurance standpoint, that makes it really difficult to place insurance. It makes it really difficult for us to find product for people, make the realtor happy. Hey, you referred Kevin over to me, got an insurance policy, but I can't do it because the roof is over 20 years old. And in today's world, insurance is really buttoning down. And I'm curious on your perspective on this, on the ages of roofs. We have, companies who will go from 15-year shingles now down to 10, 10 down to 8. Some of the older, or some of the more, some of the bigger companies are still around 20, 25, but I imagine very much like what happened during COVID when everybody got refund checks. One company sent it, everybody else sent refund checks to people. Some of this stuff is just going to be a trickle effect in how the companies adjust. I'm just curious on your perspective on waiving inspections, and what are your thoughts on this whole roof thing? Because that's the biggest issue that we find in insurance.
Yeah, I know, and I'm hearing that more and more. I'm talking to customers who say that by the time they arrive at the inspection, they'll tell me, hey, my insurance guy has already looked at pictures online, Google Earth, whatever, and is telling me the roof needs to be replaced and wants to know my opinion. So I'll get on the roof and I look for defects or evidence of wear and tear. So let's say a roof comes out of the package, it's got 100% of its life left. 25 years from now, it's at 0. So somewhere in that range, it's not really not steady tick down from 100 to 0. It rides along in the upper 90s for a while, and then they tend to last longer in the beginning or deteriorate more slowly in the beginning. Then that deteroration ramps up in the last part of the life.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
Thanks. I
I'm
just made that up. No.
No. I'm just, I think from my perspective and the perspective of being so frustrated with the partner carriers of like, why are we making those changes? You breaking it down that way, and they'll give us, the weather patterns, the sun, that, and they're just deteriorating.
That's the ironic thing about it. There's really literally no good weather for a roof. When it's a bright, sunny, clear day, they say the ultraviolet rays of the sun is like breaking down some of the glue and stuff and the adhesive that is part of that product. It starts off with a piece of fiberglass and they glue asphalt granules on top of it. So that UV is dangerous for the sun, for the shingle. And then the next step is, well, it's windy and rainy, and that's wearing off. That's going to blow off all the stuff that the UV broke down. So it's this constant back and forth. There's really no good time for a roof. It starts out there and it's doing its best it can for 10 years. And then it's, that slow process starts to accelerate.
Interesting. Again, I'm just curious too, like when you think about me as a consumer, you come to my house, what are like things that you are making sure the consumer's aware? Because attention spans are very hard to keep.
Yes,
and
they are.
I heard something the other day that really resonated with me. Your biggest product is the ability to maintain someone's attention.
I'm going to remember that. That's neat. I hadn't thought of that, but it's absolutely true. And every person, every customer I have is different. And some are very interested in the process and they're easy to maintain their level of attention. And then there are some that are a little bit all over the place.
Yeah.
And I do try to explain to my customers, the process right in the beginning, that it is an educational time for them. I encourage them to follow me around for the entire process. I encourage them to ask questions. It's a give and take. And I want them to get that knowledge. But I also understand that it's overwhelming. It's a 2-hour process and they're going to learn about structures, electrical systems, plumbing systems, mechanical systems, and it's overwhelming. And me personally, I couldn't do that. If I was sitting in a classroom and somebody was going over algebra for 45 minutes, I might get it. But if they went over algebra, English, throw in some Spanish, music, theory, like
you can only retain so much.
Right. So I get that they're going to be wandering and I try to pay attention to when they are. And then I've had customers that are so wandering that they drag me off my process. So it's hard to maintain that. And that's interesting that you said that about that. How many people.
It's with anything. And I just, cause I pride myself in thoroughness with what I do for insurance. I think we live in a day that people want things very quickly. Hey, if I guarantee if you said, if I can do this in 30 minutes or 3 hours, what would you prefer? Someone's going to choose 30 minutes, right?
Absolutely.
And I just pride myself, and I have to make sure that when I talk to customers and my clients that if you can't talk about this right now with me over the phone, we need about 15 minutes. Like, when is this going to work? Because I got to go through all the coverages. You got to be aware of what you're purchasing. Too many times I found in my career that people don't look at anything other than price. And they don't know what's covered under their policy. So that's why I think it's important to make sure that the data that comes in is accurate.
And you just said something interesting. The customers who are focused on price aren't as educated about what's going into that price. And, to choose a lower number when the numbers don't represent identical things is a big mistake for people who are focused on that. So, that's a challenge for sure. And, to my point, or to the education I'm trying to provide them, I have a backup thing in process, which is the report. So if they're not getting everything during the inspection, that's fine. They're going to get later that night a detailed report with pictures, circles, arrows on the pictures, and they're going to get a narrative with every picture about what's going on there. So, and I always tell people too to feel free to follow up call if you want to understand this report better, if you don't understand what you're looking at. But that's my ace in the hole, is that they're going to get that report. So even if I know they're not comprehending it or not even paying attention, if I've lost them, they're going to get this document after. So
obviously everything in the report is important. Everything from foundation, like I said, roof, plumbing, heating, electric. But you're going through probably 200 points, 300 points of the house.
Sure.
What are the most important that when we think about the attention piece that a buyer or whoever you're working with should pay attention to while they're on site with you, and then can go back and cross-reference down the road?
Yeah, so that's going to vary from house to house. So in a newer house, by newer, something built in this century with modern electrical panels, modern wiring systems, stuff like that, I know we're not going to expect to see too many issues with the electrical system in a house from 50, 80, 100 years ago, especially 100 years ago, where one electrical system got put in, somebody updated it, maybe that somebody was somebody's uncle, these kinds of things that changed the history of a house and how many people have touched it. So in terms of like what the most important thing for them to focus on later, it's going to vary from house to house. And if I know going into a house that's 100 years old and we're going to have this problem with the electrical system, I will specifically bring them to that and make sure that they're paying attention for that part. But for another house, the most important thing could be the structure, or another house, it could be that roof, that needs attention.
Yeah. I had a bunch of questions that I was thinking about. What is like when you think about the biggest mistake buyers have? Because the idea, there's this saying that I've heard. There's a few podcasts that I listen to, a lot of business stuff. And one of the cost of having a house, it's not the most expensive. The mortgage is not the most expensive. It's the insurance, the taxes, and the maintenance of the house. That's what is the most expensive of that. When you think about the elements of that, the maintenance, what are things that people can do to make sure that their house is in the best possible condition, and that they are not missing something? Like I had a plumbing issue here that I thought was going to be, so I'll give you, it's a funny story. We have a well, right? And we have this filtration system that we have to change out the little filter all the time.
Yep.
I forgot to, I turned off one of the water valves, and I forgot to turn the other one off. So when I released the pressure, all the water came into the thing, and I couldn't release the casing.
Yep.
So I'm like, all right. So I went to Aces, and I decided to go buy one of those housing wrenches so I can try to pull it off. Would not come off. So I'm like, okay. The more I was doing this, then I started bending the copper pipes, started leaking some water, and I'm like, okay, I need an expert to come in here. So I called a company to come out and kind of see what's going on. They came out, they're like, okay, yeah, it's going to cost a couple $100. Perfect. But then he was, looking, because he had to replace the piping. He found under the well tank, there was some leakage there. He was like, I got to do this whole thing now. Mm-hmm. Thankful for that. But that cost $1,000 now, $1,500.
Yep.
And obviously that's not a little bit of money. It's not ideal. And for a first-time home buyer, which thankfully I'm not, but a first-time home buyer, that $1,500 could be their entire savings account or their credit card statements or whatever,
Sure.
What are some preventative things that you can maybe give a listener to pay attention to throughout their home ownership?
Yeah.
process?
So this is where our industries certainly overlap. You guys want to reduce your exposure to cover or to claims and stuff like that, loss. Certainly proper maintenance is the key to that. So I do educate my customers on maintenance while we're going through stuff. But as you know, it's like either pay a little bit now for that oil filter or, ignore it for 5 years and then you're replacing a burner. So it's like,
correct.
You can't overstate the importance of minor, but like budgeting for minor maintenance. Like do the minor maintenance. That's unavoidable.
Right.
Your choice for minor maintenance or major repair.
That's a great point. Because I have this mindset of this house. This house was built in 2017. It's 2025. We're almost 10 years into this house. So I'm thinking, it's still a new house. It feels like it because I moved here 4 years ago. But there's things like that that's starting to happen. We had an issue up in our bathrooms right over here, and our bedroom bathroom. And when we moved in here, I guess there's no subfloor in our shower.
Okay.
So when the caulk cracks, the water was seeping down. I remember looking right over here from my desk, and there's like these 3 water spots. And I'm like, what the hell is this?
That's when I walked in.
So I know, and it hasn't happened again because we got it sealed up pretty good. But it cracks every like 6 months, and then we have to reseal it. But then so in our kitchen we had I guess the faucet, the hose on the faucet, when it loosens up, the water shoots up and goes down and drains into. So we're like, what the heck, So it's interesting that like you do have to just pay attention to those little things. It costs you less now for later. It's kind of like what I tell people with claims. Like, listen, think about this from the insurance perspective. How much are you comfortable paying out of pocket? Most people, for the homeowner side, historically would select $1,000 deductible, and if there's $3,000 of damage or $4,000 of damage, their instinct is to call the insurance company and have that covered for the $3,000. Today, with insurance companies, you're going to see a surcharge for 5 years. They're going to make all that money back. So carry a deductible that you're most comfortable coming out of pocket with. If it's $1,000 deductible that you have now and there's $2,500 worth of damage, what are you likely to do? You're probably going to pay out of pocket, right?
Yeah.
So then carry a $2,500 deductible, brings your premiums down a little bit, and you don't have to, or whatever it is, $5,000.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I never thought about that option.
Whatever it is you're most comfortable with, because at the end of the day, insurance company's going to make their money back. When you think about when you left the company that you were with before, what gave you the confidence to start Sunrise?
Oh yeah. So you asked about that, and I kind of got sidetracked about that first customer, that first, and I talked about the 100 inspections that you do with somebody. Even then, that first one I did solo on my own without any supervision. very nerve wracking. Am I going to
Yeah.
miss something? What am I telling somebody? And I got almost immediate feedback from the company I was working for, because he reached out to the realtors involved and asked how I did. And they said, and his most important feedback that I ever got, and this was 6 years ago in the industry now, he said, you just have to be confident in what you're discussing. And it resonated. I mean, the customer who's coming in there and wants to know about their house wants to know that I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So I think I was a little bit nervous in my delivery that first time, and it was excellent feedback. I've never gotten better feedback for how I do this. Again, you have to know the technical things. You have to know how a furnace works differently from a boiler. You have to know those things. But everything about that process of delivering that information is what you have to develop on your own. So what made me, what was the question?
What gave you the confidence, to kind of say, you know what, I'm gonna do my own thing? Because that's hard, right? Like when I thought about when I was transitioning from my company to the other company, in between that was conversations of going on my own and starting my own brokerage or own insurance company or own agency, or partnering with someone running their stuff, or just going to another company. And that requires some thought, confidence, preparation. And when I look back at it, like I felt confident, but I don't think with how it ended up, I wasn't as confident as I should be. So I'm just curious on like your perspective on that.
Yeah. So it's the confidence whole idea again. You have to know that it's going to work, that it's going to succeed. And then that's a big leap for anybody.
Did you plan it? Like, did you have like all right, this is what I'm gonna do, first year this, within the next, 3, 5, 10 years, or you just kind of jumped in? Obviously you had the the backing and
at
training
that point,
and all that stuff.
with the previous 9 years working for that other company, I certainly had the contacts. That's the most important part. You make relationships in any industry. And coming into it in 2009, I didn't have any real estate relationships. Developed those over that time, and I knew that then, it'd be a different name for them to remember, Sunrise versus the company I was working for before. But funny thing happened about a year and a half into it. I was talking to one of the realtors who I'd been using the whole time, always just giving out my cell phone number to people. And she said, "What is Sunrise?" I said, "There's a company I started like 18 months ago." Yeah. She goes, "Oh, I just refer you." So that kind of, it wasn't the confidence I needed 18 months earlier, 24 months earlier when I was thinking about doing this. But I mean, that was exactly what, you needed to hear, was like that it's you. You're, it's your company, you take care of your customers. So what gave me the confidence? I think I knew that was going to happen at some point, but
you were basically confident in your ability to deal with people more so than the process of building a business. And you felt that not that you weren't confident in building a business, but you leverage your probably strongest skill set at the time. Was it relationship building? And
yes, that was the relationship building, the strongest skill set. My weakest skill set probably, and to this day, would be something to do with like the entire technological world. Like, so I mean, I appreciate technology when I see it in cars, mechanical systems, stuff like that. But you're going to have some kind of very secure network in place to process somebody's credit card. Are you ready to do that? Like, I don't know. I see. And then you need a website. You need to be able to market.
Your website's awesome, by the way.
Oh, thanks. I didn't do it. It's finally you figure out like there are people out there that do that. And you write a check and you have a website.
That's it.
And that was the big thing for me, was like selecting and then delegating and then putting into place all of those pieces so that you can, I think I mentioned I have a system. I was talking to a customer. I have a system where they're like, "How do I pay you?" I'm like, "Well, I'll just basically, you're going to, once I put a job on my schedule, you're going to get an email that you can use to pay with a link right there. You can bring me cash at the inspection. You can write a check, do whatever." So, it's having that system in place that you have to develop. Being a home inspector doesn't change from when you're working for somebody else and now you own a company that does home inspections. The thing that changes is now you're doing some accounting, you're doing some financing, you're doing some marketing, you're doing the networking, all those things that are.
Now, are you do you have a team? Like, do you have people that work on it?
I do.
Yeah. They didn't start that way, though. It was just you at first?
Yeah, it was just me, but it wasn't just me for long. And I still recognize that as my problem. I'm still trying to bring in more people, but I have a great guy that works with me now. So I don't say team, team's a good word. I like that. I don't say, works for me. I don't say anything. I say he works with me. He's a great home inspector, and he's, I take care of all of the scheduling part of it, the management part of like the financing stuff and running the credit cards and stuff. But I couldn't be luckier to have an inspector like him that wants to work with Sunrise. His name's Chris. He's great. So I could use a couple more Chris's, you know. But because between the two of us, our schedules fill up
Right.
every week and week and a half out, and then somebody will call today and say, "Hey, I really need to get an inspection. Can you come Friday?" I'm like, "That's outside. You know, there's no chance I'm available on a Friday." Unless it's a week and a half out. But that's hard for people in this process who are signing contracts, need to get stuff done in a small window. But so I call him my colleague, Chris. Yeah. Chris is my colleague. And, when people call up and they say, "Hey, can you get anything done this week?" And I'll say, "I can't. Chris my colleague might have something." I'm looking to build that team. I like that too. That's obviously just as good.
That's what it is, man. And that's why I went back to the company that I'm at, because of the team. Yep. I've played on teams my entire life. Yeah. I've played baseball, through up until like last summer. Anything that I've done required a level of competition was also an element of team. And for me, that's where I thrive. And it's really built me into a better person when you have people around you who can, pick up the pieces, if you will, when, I don't know everything. And I can, reach out to somebody and ask them a question or pick their brain and how they would have done this. When you go into certain relationship scenarios, like how would you have navigated that? And I just I credit everything to the organization that I'm with because of that aspect. You mentioned technology. And I'm very curious. I'm always curious with anybody that I sit with. I've sat down with a carpenter. I've sat down with, obviously I mentioned earlier, professionals, sports, and we talked analytics and technology. Obviously in my business, technology is becoming, specifically AI is becoming really prevalent, where you go online and you literally are talking to someone that's not someone. It's a robot, and people can buy insurance that way. I think that's actually going to get more difficult for people, especially when they need somebody. So I'm not worried about that. But what's that like for you with technology?
Well, it's interesting you brought up AI, and I've been kind of resistant toward embracing it. And I'm sure it's I don't doubt it's a very powerful tool. People have told me you should let it write your reports. I put too much effort, I think, in creating something very specific for a very specific scenario that I observe in the field to do that yet, or feel comfortable doing that. But I tried AI last night on something because I was looking for an answer for my customer for a situation that I encountered in the field where complicated. You said you have a well, so you understand, but homes that have wells that have water treatment systems, for a long time, they've been using, a water softener has a discharge that comes off it that's very high in salt content. It's brine. And how we dispose of that is a challenge, the brine that comes off that. And for years, people were just plumbing that to a house drain, which in a lot of cases was ending up in septic systems, which is harmful for the tank. It'll break down the concrete more quickly. It's going to kill off the little enzymes that are working in your septic system. So last night, AI was looking, what do we do with it? Because I saw this person was just letting it discharge onto the ground. And I'm like, well, is that bad? Is it not bad? I don't know. Really, what is that doing there? And AI said to put it in the septic tank. And every septic inspector I've ever seen says how bad that is for your septic system. So I just thought, it was the first thing that comes up in Google now is like all these choices of what to do with it. And that was the number one choice. And I thought, well, that's wrong. And that's not the first time I've looked at AI things and said, I disagree with that entirely.
I always went, so I use ChatGPT every day. I use it for, actually there's a lot of content purposes, but I use the ChatGPT Open AI. And I will go back to him like, what you're telling me is contradictory to this. Why? And then it will break down why, and then it kind of gives me the answer that I'm kind of digging for. But I use it. I don't use it too much in my field in terms of I can't really because of privacy, data accuracy and integrity. We don't want to put anybody's customer information in there. But I'll have it like build out content creation for insurance and content creation for my podcast stuff and whatnot. But it is interesting that it can relay incorrect information because it's somebody who programmed it to do that. And it's now you challenging it is now going to reprogram it, and maybe hopefully one day you get your answer from it. So
that's interesting. That's how it works. Yeah.
I think. Yeah. At least I hope. You mentioned that there's situations where buyers expect you to make a decision for them on buying the house. I think that's very interesting. Walk me through that. Like, give me an example, because I'm curious on like as a buyer, why would they rely on you when they're already so emotionally invested in this? It's, what are those conversations like?
Yeah. So I think that like sometimes so typically at the home inspection, that might be the second time that they're at the house. So typically they're there for a showing, or maybe it was an open house, and then they put in their offers and contracts and they get to the inspection. It's often the second time they're there. So I always feel like the first time they're there, in their mind, they're seeing kids playing in the backyard, and that's what they see when they see the house, and I see defective wiring. So it's a different view. So they're typically, and it's only, like I said, it's 2 to 3 hours, somewhere in there. So by the end of that process, then they're kind of reeling sometimes. And I don't want to get them reeling. I just want them to have that information and take their time to kind of process it. But sometimes they'll say to me right then, they're like, well, would you buy this house? That's a tough question to answer. And then they'll say, and I'll just say, well, I have one. I'm not shopping for a house now, but they say, well, a lot of times too, especially with younger buyers or first-time home buyers, young couples, a parent will be there.
Yes.
And somehow now I'm on that age of that parent.
Right.
My kids are old enough to buy houses now, which is a whole different subject of how time goes. But the parent will look at me and say, would you let your kid buy this house? And then that's a wildly different kind of question.
That's
to answer
crazy.
To. Yeah. I get that question every time there's a parent
But
there.
do you expect because I mean, most people aren't educated at that level, right? Most people, the average person, I was just even thinking about father-in-law, who I highly respect, and he's very knowledgeable in pretty much everything. Like, I feel like any aspect of things. He was with us on our first home inspection, and he didn't really challenge the home inspector, but I could see him being like, what do you think? Like, we're in the process right now of working on something in our deck in the back where we want to close off the stairs and make it wider on the wide side of the deck, and then do a little patio, but we have to dig about, I think he said 6 inches down and 12 feet, pretty long. But that's something he's confident with. And, but when I think about the first time we bought the house, he would have never just challenged that home inspector. But I feel like, what's that like for you? Like I
get some folks that challenge me during the process. And we could talk for a second later about like the difference between Connecticut and Rhode Island. Rhode Island, there's somebody that is challenging everything you say. It's a wildly different market. Connecticut's much easier to work in, but I always start every inspection the same way, and I introduce myself to my customers and I ask them, what do they do? That's first question. What do you do? Because I mean, if they're an electrician, I don't want to explain like outlets to somebody who knows more about them than I do.
Right.
But if they're, in any other industry and they want to know more about that, that's fine. And then we'll delve more deeply into anything they want to know about. But so I get challenged sometimes, but I always I explain to them that everything is different. Everything is new. Every home is unique. Things evolve. We learn as we as a society have learned how to build and change how we build homes over the years. So when we could be staying in a home built 100 years ago, it's not going to be built the way they're built today. And somebody would have modified or fixed something to fix a specific issue they addressed 50 years ago. So when I get challenged, I turn it into a conversation.
Yeah.
I'm open to, like, somebody else had a different idea about this 50 years ago and they took it on. I don't think it's the best way to do it, and here's why. But if you've got an opinion on it, let's talk about it. So I encourage like that kind of give and take with my customers, and I've never had anything that's ever become contentious, except in Rhode Island. Rhode Island's so bizarre. You could explain to somebody why something's wrong, and it's always the listing agent who will be standing over your shoulder and saying, "Well, hasn't been a problem yet." I could say that you've got a defective electrical panel, one that's, you probably know of some of the brands in the industry that, as a PNC person, like Federal Pacific, for example, like if we see a Federal Pacific panel, we recommend replacing it. Well, it's never been a problem.
Right. Right.
That's what they'll say to you.
Right. Is the dynamic different when you deal with a listing agent and a buyer's agent?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. How?
The buyer's agent, obviously, the good ones are very concerned with making sure their buyers get a good deal, obviously, but also, every agent wants the deal to close. But I've worked with a lot of great buyer's agents who say this isn't the right deal for my customer, and they're willing to let the deal stop.
Yeah.
Sometimes a listing agent wants to get that deal to the closing line, and I respect that desire, but just understand that, well, then all we're talking about is maybe changing a panel, and we'll get there.
Yeah,
we'll all be on the same page then.
It's crazy because I have had, thankfully, no one that referred me this person. It's somebody that actually came to me from a Google listing because I have a significant I have 180. I'm gonna say I have 180 5-star reviews on Google.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So a lot of people come to me through that organically. And I had a customer, buying a house, and I go through the whole thing, and I'm like, dude, like, I'm looking at these pictures. I can't put a policy on the books for you because if I do, one or two things are going to happen. You're going to get to closing. They're going to do a insurance inspection, and then that policy is going to cancel for underwriting. Mm-hmm. You are going to look at me, not the company. You're going to look at me, hey, you put me in this so I could close. So, but the urgency level that people have to buy these houses because of the attachment that we talked about, the emotional, the excitement of it. And, Kevin had said, it's like, you get the new keys to the car and that thrill that you have for a week. And all of a sudden, you issue after issue after issue, septic, whatever it is. And I just don't feel right putting stuff on the books without really doing it the right way.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned that urgency with, the whole process or that purchase process. That's the pressure that's on folks now to buy a house is different than it was 5 years ago or before the pandemic, even with the limited inventory. That's what the realtors call it. There's not enough homes for sale right now, and to meet the demand from the buyers who are in the market. So, and that's, you mentioned waiving inspections. That's one of the tricks that came about, I would say. It's a terrible idea, but
so bad.
The idea that we're going to make our offer look more attractive than somebody who's maybe going to offer another % more buying price, but we're going to say we're going to waive inspection. So if you're the seller and you have issues in the house, you're going to take the one who's going to make that process go more quickly. You would take that over another $1,500, $2,000 in an offer, because somebody's going to find $10,000 worth of issues or something like that. So
what's the messaging for that? What's your message to buyers, realtors?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I would love to get everybody on board with that. I wish okay, you know what? I don't like to use like threats to scare people into stuff, but the idea that everybody would, if you're the realtor and you're advising your client to waive this inspection, that advice is going to come back to haunt that person if they found some major issue. And we all know that, like, if you find that major issue and you can't afford to fix it, you're calling an attorney.
Right.
And litigation is the scary thing for anybody
Who
involved.
are they suing? Are they suing everybody? Insurance?
I would think so, but here's the thing. So they might go after the seller and say there was fraud or misrepresentation in the disclosure. Something didn't get listed that they felt should have been. But then at some point, their attorneys are going to be like, well, we go after that person, but they don't have any money. So let's look at everybody the attorneys are going to cast a wide net. They're going to try to pull in everybody they can into something like this. So, I don't know how you wouldn't eventually come back to the realtor. Realtors have the waiver. They can get somebody to sign it and be like, well, you said you understood you were waiving this. But if you're a professional, you're advising this buyer, and this buyer ended up buying something that they could have had more information about, I would come back to the process and say, why was I given that advice? I was told, well, I would get to the finish line. And I think both listing agents and buyers agents, if they just agreed out there, like, let's not let that happen. Everyone just let the inspections happen.
Because the house somebody will still buy the house.
Somebody will still buy the house.
Somebody will still buy the house.
But I think listing agents love that. If the buyer's agent's coming in and saying, hey, we got a guy who's going to waive inspection, the listing agent will be like, yeah, we're going toward this deal. And I worked with this one great agent who's herself working with a buyer, and she was a year and a half. And she'd call me up and ask me what I had available the next week. I'd give her some dates and times, and then and then she would call back a couple days later and say, we didn't get it. And she told me, she goes, listen, we're not getting them because somebody else came in and waived their inspection. She goes, my guy won't waive it, and I tell him don't waive it. She found a house for him. We got to come to the inspection, and I was nervous at that inspection. I was like, I wouldn't find anything wrong with this. Poor guy's waited a year and a half for this. But there's, that's what I would like to get that message out there. Just take that off the table. If every offer was contingent upon some kind of inspection, then that, make the offers better and worse for other reasons. But don't make that a carrot in front of somebody.
I do want to double down on that from the insurance standpoint too, because again, I think of things from a customer experience standpoint. If I get a referral from the mortgage person or from the realtor person, and they refer me, and I'm being told that either inspections were waived, which that's really hard to place with certain carriers, or there's misrepresentation on that inspection report, that being the roof saying, it's a brand new roof or it's within 5 years, but it's really 15 years old. And, we don't have, the furnace is, outdated. It's 50 years, but you said it was done within the last 10 years, whatever the case might be. A lot of people are saying that these days. And I'm wondering if they're coached to say this, like, hey, not from the inspector, right, but from the realtor, because it's amazing when people come to me and I'm like, hey, 4 things I need to know. How old's your roof? How old's the electric, plumbing, and heating? That's pretty simple in the inspection report.
I've had customers come to me and they say, my insurance person has these questions. So
I usually say that, hey, have you done the inspection? Oh yeah, great. All right. What did you find in the inspection? Or if you didn't, can you just make sure that you go to
questions? Yeah.
These are the 4 things I need to know. How old's the electric, plumbing, heating, and roof? But when they come to me and they are not accurate, I'm going based off of what they're telling me. And I just think, like I said, the customer experience is, if you referred me, Mr. Mortgage Person or Mrs. Realtor, and they get that policy and it cancels because of underwriting, who is it going to fall on? It's going to fall on the referee. They're going to not ever do business with me. That you've referred them to me. That experience is just kind of collapsed because now they're going to, most people don't check their mail. Most people don't check their mail. So when it comes to the, underwriting cancellation notices, they don't even know. Mortgage company gets it. Now the mortgage company says, hey, you don't have any insurance. They still didn't check their mail. Or when that happens, the mortgage company is going to do forced insurance on them, which is 2-3 times more the price than what I have. Mm-hmm. So then the mortgage payment goes up. Hey, what happened? The insurance canceled. So I just think of it from a holistic standpoint. It's not just about the client and getting the deal done. It's just making sure that things are accurate on the application, because the insurance companies aren't going to for houses that are built within the last 10 years or remodeled in the last 10 years, there's a huge discount for that, right? Mm-hmm. But when it comes to older homes with renovations and stuff like that, I just think it needs to be accurate. So I'll double down on that because, I think it needs to be done.
It's funny you talk about representation and stuff like that. I did a home a couple of years ago now, but I'll never forget it. It was, the home itself was built in the 60s. And the listing agent who wrote up whatever got put on Realtor.com to market the home said, new roof in 1999. Like, that's not a selling feature. That roof is already 26 years old.
Man. Well, because clients will come over and be like, we got a 50-year shingle roof. It's like, listen, I can't help you. I can't. And then, oh, well, that's ridiculous. Well, yeah, I agree, because if I don't help you, I don't win. If you don't win, if I don't win, you don't win. You know what I mean? Or vice versa. You don't win, I don't win. So, how do you approach older homes versus newer homes?
Good question. And the funny thing is, it's how do I approach like newer homes versus older homes?
Okay.
Because newer homes, I'm very careful not to miss something that you don't want to get complacent, walk into a new home and expect everything's going to be fine, because you find stuff. The process, the very, the business process of how a home gets built nowadays is, it's been this way for a while, but you'll have a general contractor, and that person is organizing different teams that don't necessarily speak with each other. So you'll have the foundation gets done, then they have framers come in, and the framers do their thing. Framers leave, and they're gone forever. When the plumbers come in, and they're going to run some rough-in plumbing, they call it. And I say that I have this mental image that I know when I'm coming into new construction. It's like, plumbers and electricians hate framers. Mm-hmm. Like, they don't care. Yeah. Like, that beam was in my way, so I cut 4-inch hole out in it, to run my pipe through it. That's insane, but we see it.
Right.
So you don't want to come into some new home and be like, oh, everything's perfect. Mm-hmm. It rarely is. A very good friend of mine who's another home inspector, competing home inspector, also Ryan, if you probably run him, he's out there.
Yeah, probably.
He's got a business going here in Southeastern Connecticut as well. He sends pictures. Like, we send pictures to each other. There's a few of inspectors that if we see something in the field that amuses us. So he was doing a brand new construction that had already got a CO, and he sends this picture from the attic, and there's not a speck of insulation in it. So you have to be careful. You don't want to say, oh, I don't need to go in the attic because it's brand new. Yeah. That would have cost somebody thousands to find that out later.
Yeah. Listen, we got about 10 minutes or so.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I told you it goes by fast. Yeah, we got 10 minutes or so. We live in a really historic area. Yep. Mystic, New London, Groton, Stonington, Westerly.
Yeah.
Even up here in
Norwich,
Colchester. Norwich.
Yeah, right? They have really old construction.
Really old construction. When it comes to these older homes, are they significantly harder to maintain long-term, or is that like just a myth? And I always go back to the insurance perspective on this, because after 1900, like, I'm having a hard time placing, or before 1900.
Sure. So it depends. That's a great question, Paul. In terms of like harder to maintain going forward, it depends on like Mystic, for example, versus Norwich. Mystic has a historical society, which people in the trades kind of refer to as the hysterical society, because they're a little bit crazy with how they want to maintain this aesthetic of, like you can't put vinyl on your house. It's got to be maintain that wood clapboard or wood shingle and stuff. Where in Norwich, you can have an antique home and put vinyl on it, and that's going to cost less to maintain going forward.
Right.
The absolutely ironic thing about what the historical society, this unnatural pressure that they put on homeowners, is that if you've ever read any history and stuff about like those whalers and fishermen and women from 1600s, 1700s, 1800s that had built those homes in Mystic, they were very pragmatic people. They embraced things that were going to make their life easier. If you showed up in 1800s and somebody's putting siding on a house and you showed them vinyl, they would be like, oh, hell yeah, I'm going with vinyl. That's brilliant. We never have to paint it, and it's going to be good for 30. So the historical society is putting this fake, trying to maintain this aesthetic of what it was like in 1800 there in downtown Mystic. But I believe that those people would have really embraced any kind of improvement.
Funny. That's funny. So you've inspected probably thousands of homes. You would say thousands of homes.
About 7,500.
What's one thing a homeowner, new buyer, is overlooking throughout that process that you see as a common trend?
Sure. When they, the new home buyer, when they're first coming in during their showings and open houses, they're over everything. It's like I said, they're seeing, and it's not a slight on them. I would do the same thing. When I look at houses and I see one on, driving by a sale sign in front of it or something, I think, oh, I could see myself working in that garage in the shop. That's a brilliant shop. And that's what I see. I don't see the electrical and the plumbing. And so they're always overlooking the kind of, it's not even an overlooking, and they're just not seeing what I need to come in and see for them.
Yeah. So, like I said, a few minutes. You mentioned a prayer from your church, and then this is just more about you as a person. I'm a very, I like spirituality. I like being able to connect with people on a spiritual side. So I think this is a good way to close here. But you mentioned a prayer from your church that stuck with you. It's something about remembering the sacrifices of those who came before and stewarding for those who follow. How's that show up for you on a day-to-day basis in your work?
Wow. All right. So it's a good question. It's a prayer we say at the end of every mass, and it's not even related to the mass or the faith. It's more about taking care of the facility and that we have as a church that we're collectively trying to maintain for somebody else. But it reminds me that we're sort of transitory in this passage that we go through, and it takes me back to that prayer always reminds me when I hear it of a Native American saying, which is that we don't inherit the land from our grandfathers; we borrow it from our kids. And the idea is that we really have to take care of what we have, and it just reminds me that everything you do has an impact down the road. So live like that. Live like you're part of this community that's not linear, like on this page that we're on, but like linear this way. Remember that. Well, you're here because of all the stuff
that's happened.
Folks ahead of you have done, and you want to take care of it for the ones coming after you.
Yeah, I love that, man. What did I miss? I like to, if there's anything that you want the audience to know, is there anything that I missed? Anything that we didn't cover?
I don't think so. This was fun. I hope it wasn't too boring for the customers.
I thought it was a lot of fun, man. I appreciate your work. Again, going back to what I said in the opening, your ability to just connect with people, think of people. You thought about me a couple months ago, one of your, friends who needed help with some insurance.
Yeah.
And, it was a surprise because, I think we had just reconnected because of the e-car stuff. And I'm like, I know you had somebody in your network in the past and whatnot. So it was just, you care about people. So,
I do. It was fun to reconnect with you and to see you at one of those things. Like I said, we overlapped in our professional lives for what seemed like a brief period. But it's funny. I've seen you more in the last year than I had during the time that we. And that's always funny because if I come into a room at night, like a networking event, and I part of me internally dreads that. I like to meet people and know people, but in a room where there's going to be 100 of them at once, and I'm like, my mind shuffles everybody's names, and that's very scary to me sometimes. I'm a little anxiety, but I was like, hey, there's Paul, and I'll work my way to the room. It's like just happy to see you. You're one of those faces that
I appreciate that. Where could people find Sunrise, and you and Sunrise?
All right, excellent. I have an 800 number, so if they really need to book something when I'm on a job doing something else, I have an answering service that's ready to go to book them. Should I tell you the number?
Yeah.
I would know that.
The number. It's all right. We could. Yeah. what the number is?
I have to look that up.
That's all good.
I've only had it for 6 years. It's 844-556-3385. They're there to answer the call like 7 days a week. They're there, which is good.
Awesome.
Obviously, we're on the internet at Sunrise Home Inspection LLC.com. But if you Google Sunrise Home Inspection, you find us.
Yeah.
We're on Facebook and Instagram. Don't do a lot of work there, not as much as I should, but it's usually only, I see a lot of home inspectors on those social media posts that are helpful hints and good stuff, which is important. But I just post the stuff that I think is ridiculous.
Find somebody to do it for you.
Yeah, I know. That's what I got to do.
That's I know a couple guys who hired external VA people to do all that stuff, and it's worked out. So Kevin Power joined me on the Open Exchange. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment if you like the show. And thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it.
Paul, thanks very much. Appreciate
no
it.
problem. Thanks.